Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills, and grit take centre stage. I'm your host, Donal O'Donoghue, and this is episode 7. I'm very pleased to say that the podcast is sponsored by Sanderson, leaders in global talent solutions, and by Finero, the multi-award-winning tax experts who support success for contractors, freelancers, and solopreneurs. In this episode, I am delighted to be joined by Dr. Julie Schiro, who is the Academic Director for the MSc in Digital Marketing at UCD Smurfit, and she's also the Assistant Professor of Marketing. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Donal. Thank you for having me.
It's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you.
So people are going to notice from the accent that you're not local to these parts. Tell us a bit about where you're from.
So I am from a very small town in Northern California that most people won't know, even people around the area. But if you know Folsom, like Folsom Prison,
Johnny Cash.
Exactly. I'm about 20 minutes from there.
Very good. So tell us a little about yourself. Obviously, we've mentioned your role in UCD Smurfit, but take us back a bit to your early life, because on this podcast, we like talking about talent and that often emerges in early life. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was a very curious child. I still am very curious, and I'm really grateful to my parents for fostering that. So I'll give you an example. In 1999, the movie October Sky came out. Are you familiar with that?
Not really.
Okay, it's an old movie, but it's with Jake Gyllenhaal. It's a true story about a guy who launches rockets. And I watched this movie, and I thought, I want to launch rockets. And normally, I think, most parents would be like, maybe, no, that's not a thing that you can do. And but my parents were never like that. They were like, okay, let's go figure out how we can launch some rockets in the backyard. And we had a lot of land, so it wasn't dangerous. But we found this rocket kit at Walmart, and it came with these like small, they were called AA engines, but you could buy like the double D engines, which of course we wanted those. Those ones were the most powerful ones. And so we bought this rocket kit and we launched them. We wanted to launch the rockets out in the backyard. But the problem was that they would deploy a parachute and then they would just float away because they were so high. So then we ended up building rockets, or trying to build rockets. And it was a full family affair. So we got PVC pipe. My mom sewed the parachutes and made the little fins. And we had a lot of false starts because like the first problem was that the glue would melt. So then the fins would fall off and then it didn't work properly, or the parachute wouldn't deploy, but it was those kind of things. Anytime that I wanted to try something new, I was able to do it. So
That's great encouragement, isn't it?
Yeah, I ended up doing all sorts of things, ice skating, horseback riding, archery. It was really anything that I thought I could do, my parents helped me to try and do.
And it's so different to the generation that are growing up today that are often just popped in front of a screen or popped in front of an iPad. In terms of what your early interests were, aside from rockets, what kind of subjects did you gravitate towards?
Well, a lot of creative subjects, I would say. For a while, I was really into drawing manga, and I loved anime. I still do, actually. And I was very interested in cinema. So I loved movies, and I loved making movies. I had a cheap recorder, and I would make movies with my friends. And of course, like, this was way before social media, so no one ever saw them. But I thought that I wanted to go to Hollywood, and that is initially what I did.
So talk to us a little bit about that path.
Well, so I thought growing up in the country that I really wanted to go and live in LA, live in a big city, very different from what I was used to. And so that's what I did. I moved to Los Angeles. I went to the University of Southern California, and I studied both business and film because I always wanted to be on the business side of cinema. But I ended up working on several sets. I took classes with all the cinema students. And I mean, it's a passion that's really stuck with me through my whole life to this day. We'll get into that later. But eventually, as I was concluding my undergraduate degree, I realized that what I was really interested in was psychology and storytelling, and that is a lot broader than even just cinema. So I decided that I would pivot into research. I ended up working for the big studios and doing market research for them, testing different commercials and packages, honestly doing things that are now you can automate with A/B testing. But at the time, we had to do it manually. And I worked in market research for about a year and realized, I want to be the one asking the questions. And also, I want to be a student. I think I was the only one sad on graduation, undergraduate graduation, because I didn't want to leave.
So that's what kind of drew you back towards the PhD route?
Yeah, it is.
And tell us a little bit about that. So you kind of finished the undergrad, you'd got some experience, and what was the path towards PhD? Where did you study the PhD?
At the University of Colorado in Boulder.
Okay.
And I was very motivated to pursue this PhD. And of course, there's a lot of competition and not a lot of places, because in the US, the PhDs are typically fully funded and they take about 4 people a year.
Wow.
And in my year, they took 1, and that was me. I think they made 3 offers, but I was the one that accepted. And so I was a class size of 1. These are very small intakes, because they spend so much time training you and developing your skills. But I knew that I knew that I would need to find a way to stand out, because I didn't have a master's and there are just so many applicants. And so what I did is I decided to go to our biggest conference, which no one does. But I thought, if I can meet people from all of these schools that I want to go to in person and make an impression on them, that's a way for me to stand out, because that is something that no one else, well, I think there was one other person that was doing it at the time. And that's always been kind of my strategy, is to make the extra effort and do things that other people either don't think to do or don't want to do, because it was a lot of time and money, and I had to put myself out there, like flying to this conference and running around meeting people, but it absolutely paid off. That is essentially how I got the spot at Boulder.
Wow. And how long did it take to complete?
5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And tell us about the journey after that and ending up in Ireland.
Right. So I've always wanted to live abroad and see what that was all about. And I remember, I think I was 12 years old. My dad got a job offer to go to London. And, they were going to pay for the move and all of that. And I remember he kind of told me offhandedly, like, oh, yeah, no, I turned it down. And I remember thinking, wait, why didn't we have a family meeting about this? Like, why was this not even discussed? And in my mind, I remember thinking, when I have control over my life, like, I want to take those opportunities. And I think it's funny looking back, like, I can really see myself, at 12 years old, like, being the same person that I am today. And obviously I did end up doing that. So, I've always kind of gravitated towards what I would say, like, the European style of life, work-life balance. And, like, I love the proximity to so many different cultures here. And so when I was interviewing, academia is a global career. You can really go anywhere that there are universities. So I was thrilled when I got the offer from UCD Smurfit. That was my first choice, and I've been here ever since.
How did Ireland come? Were you just generally looking for international opportunities, or how did Ireland come on the radar?
Well, I really wanted to go to Europe, but I realized when I was an undergrad, I spent a summer in Hong Kong. And at 19, that was very overwhelming to me because I didn't speak the language. And I realized after that, if I'm going to move abroad and I'm going to do it all by myself where I don't know anyone, I need to pick an English-speaking country. So naturally, that narrowed it down to 2 places, because this was pre-Brexit. And so that was, the UK and Ireland. So at least for Europe. So I was deciding between that and New Zealand and staying in the US. But I really wanted to be in Europe.
And it's remarkable, isn't it, what an impact those decisions, at a critical time in your life can have in terms of the path your life takes, you know, where you
Yeah.
live, who you meet, you know, where you settle. And do
Entirely.
you feel settled in Ireland? How many
I
years are you here
do.
now?
About 8 years. Yeah.
Very good.
So yeah, my life is here now, and you're absolutely right. I mean, my life has changed completely based on that decision. I met my husband here. You know, we have a house here. Like our life is here, and I'm just really grateful.
Brilliant. So tell me a little bit about your work and your research areas.
Yeah. So I'm really interested in the area of creative effectiveness, and especially on the digital side, because so much content happens digitally and attention spans are so short for digital content. And so but there's so many things that you have to do simultaneously with content to make it strategic. So it's not enough to just be entertaining. You also have to weave your product or your brand into that in a really compelling way that people want to engage with. And that's really challenging to do well. And so I've kind of dedicated my research career to looking at, well, how do you do that? So my favorite award at the Cannes Lions is the Creative Effectiveness Award, because to me, that is the gold standard. You're being creative, but you're also driving real results.
And so I suppose, what can marketers do when you think about an environment where, and it appears that attention spans are getting shorter, because even when
Yeah.
you look at some of the analytics for TikTok or YouTube Shorts, you know, people are scrolling content and
Yeah.
stopping for maybe a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds. So it's such a small window for a brand or an individual to be able to make any kind of an impact. What are the changes that you've seen in that area?
Well, you really need to get the tone of the platform right, and you need to be fast. So I was really surprised to learn that Kraft, you know, they make mac and cheese.
Yeah, the food company.
Yeah, they are huge they are huge on TikTok. And I was really surprised by this until I looked at some of the content that they were creating, and they are very good at emulating the style of TikTok. They're using viral audio, they're following viral trends, and they're being very entertaining. It's not, you know, buy mac and cheese. It's like, here's a funny clip of us, you know, playing with mac and cheese. Like they have the tone right. And I think that's actually quite hard to do. But ultimately, you just want to stay top of mind. So if you can create content that people want to engage with organically, you're going to have a leg up.
We had a good example of you applying your theory in practice a few years ago, because some people may know you created a YouTube channel that has had, I would say, hundreds of thousands of views, or possibly 1.7 million. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Talk to us a little bit about that. What kind of drove you to do that, and what did you learn from applying your theory to practice?
Yeah. So that was an interesting experiment. So this was when we were all going online. And I remember at that time, I kept getting ads for Masterclass. And Masterclass, specifically Natalie Portman and her class on acting. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if we are all going online and teaching online, I am now competing with Natalie Portman. Like, the bar has just gone so much higher. And so I thought, well, what can I do about this? I can try and improve my own home studio setup. And I've always been interested in cinema. But I had to learn a lot. I'd really forgotten kind of everything I knew about using Adobe Premiere and using, you know, digital cameras and whatnot. But I started by ordering a microphone, because at the bare minimum, like, that is going to be what people, that is going to determine whether people actually pay attention to you in an online.
Good quality audio.
Good quality audio. And so I originally made a video talking about microphones, and it was really made for my department and other people in academia, because I thought our students cannot listen to a 3-hour lecture if there is a high-pitched screeching sound, which I was hearing on calls. And after I made that video, I thought, well, I think that the broader community might be interested in some of these things. So, what's the next thing? Well, lighting is the next thing. So I made a video on how to light yourself, and I thought I should see if I can get traction in the broader community, because this is something that people are going to search a lot.
And that's kind of courageous, particularly for the role that you're in, because if you put yourself out there and it hadn't gone well, was that a consideration for you?
It was. I was a bit nervous about that. And, because on top of putting yourself out there, you're putting into practice what you're teaching. And so if it doesn't work out, that's a little bit awkward, right? And so that was on my mind. But I also thought, well, I believe that the stuff that I teach works, and I applied it and it works. So I'm happy with that. But there was a lot of strategy behind it. It wasn't just, oh, I'm going to throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. It was looking at what are the biggest topics that people are searching for, and how can I optimize my content, both in terms of the script itself, because YouTube looks at what you're saying when it decides how to rank content, because it transcribes your videos. So it will actually look and see, are you mentioning the keywords that are in your title and your description? Is this video really about what you say it's about? And so I looked at, what are people searching a lot for? How can I optimize the script and the descriptions to be a really perfect match for that? And what's already out there? There were several topics that I chose not to pursue because there was already such great content out there, and really fresh content. So,
do you remember any of those topics that you avoided?
Yeah, I do. One of them was on shotgun mics, which I find really interesting. And I was all ready to go out and buy a bunch of shotgun mics, mainly
What's a shotgun mic?
A shotgun mic is a mic that would be off camera. It would be kind of positioned almost like right here above your head. And so it'd be like a boom mic. And you see it a lot with interviews where there's no mic in the frame. They're either going to use a lavalier or a shotgun mic, or both. But I saw, I think it was DSLR Shooter is the name of the channel, that had like an amazing video on that. And I was like, well, nope, not going to try and overtake that. I know that I can't. There's already what I would consider to be like a 10x piece of content on that topic. It's kind of 10 times better than anything else that I'm seeing. And so I have to look for opportunities where there's a lot of demand, and I have to be really honest with myself about, can I make something that's better than what I'm seeing right now? Like the top 5 results, am I going to add something new to this? And actually the most successful video that I did, just in terms of views, was the first one on web cameras. And the reason that I decided to pursue that one, and that was a real gamble, because I invested about €1,000 of my own money to buy all of these cameras. But I thought, there's only one video right now that shows actual video footage from all of these different webcams. All the other videos would talk about the cameras, but they would just use stock footage and tell you what the specs were, something I could read online. And I knew there was an opportunity there. And so I bought all these web cameras. I filmed with all these web cameras. It took forever. It was really expensive. And then I made sure that the script was optimized for mentioning all those different web cameras, and also the descriptions. And that video was #1 for the keyword best webcam for about a year.
Wow.
In 2021.
#1 globally.
Globally. And one of the things that I learned from that video, and I already knew it, but it became very salient, was that I started getting messages from people, first of all over the world, but in all different disciplines. So when you talk about marketing segmentation, I really don't like the focus on personas and demographics as such, because I think it's just too narrow. Because the reality is that your audience base is going to have all different demographics and psychographics. What they're going to share is an interest in solving the problem that your product or your content solves. And this became especially clear to me when I started getting messages from fitness instructors. That was a huge market for the videos, because they were streaming all of their fitness classes. But also I got messages from police officers, from priests. I mean, it was a huge range of people from different backgrounds and interests that were finding that content useful, because I was solving a very common problem.
And how many videos are currently on your channel?
There are 5 videos on the channel.
Okay, so you've obviously been quite selective about putting up content that was strong, that you were proud of, that you could stand over, that there was some kind of thinking and strategy behind.
Yeah.
And when we talked last week, we kind of said the channel at the moment almost feels like a time capsule to that time when the world went online.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about creating content again? Or are you thinking to leave it there until you have something that you really want to talk about? Or what's your thought process on it?
Yeah, I'm a bit unsure, and I think I'm a bit so one thing that people are often surprised to hear is that I'm actually quite shy. And so I think that the channel became much bigger than I ever anticipated. Even applying the things that I teach, I thought it would get good traction, but thinking that over 1.7 million people have watched me talk about various web cameras and lighting and whatnot has, I think, kind of in my mind created the standard of every video has to be better than the last. And it's certainly, it's sort of, I'm psyching myself out is really what's happening a little bit. And so I've said at the end of each video, I'm going to make more content. And so I've if I say now I'm going to make more content, like I can't credibly say it. I won't put myself in that position, but I have rebuilt my home studio recently. And so we'll see what happens. But I do really love creating the content. And I think, getting over my own shyness is something that I've worked on really my whole life. And you might wonder, like, why, if you're so shy, like, pick a career where you're literally doing public speaking as a professor. That is a big part of our job. And I think the answer is that I've just never wanted the fear of anything to hold me back. So I just power through it because this is really what I really want to do. So, and it does get easier.
And it's kind of a common thread because there are a lot of people, and again, it goes back to talent and interest that, maybe are fantastic at sport or, are really into that. And they find themselves then thrust into the spotlight because they're an athlete or because they're an entrepreneur or because they've written a book. So it is, and it's really encouraging to hear that because it's a personal development area, isn't it, that you can really focus on. Some of your research and some of your work that you applied was all around virality and what goes viral and what doesn't, and what, you mentioned a little bit there about the YouTube algorithm and various algorithms. Talk to us a little bit about that.
So engagement rates are a huge part of what YouTube decides to show. Now, their algorithm for ranking content is under lock and key. They're not going to tell you exactly what it is. But one thing that I know is that it's sort of an evergreen strategy to focus on engagement. If you can get content that people respond to, comment on, like, and share, that's a really strong signal to Google. So when I was thinking about creating the content, I knew that so when I was thinking about creating the content, I knew that it was going to have to be something that got attention right away and held attention. There could be no filler content. And so for a 10-minute video, that was one of them had 14 hours of footage that I took that I condensed into a 10-minute video.
Wow.
And there's another reason why there's only 5 videos on the channel. And that is because, of course, YouTube, Google doesn't say for certain, but I do believe that they're looking at the overall engagement rate of the channel as well. So I've heard of some advice or common advice that I hear is, produce as much content as you can because you never know what's going to stick. And I don't think that's good advice, because if you produce a lot of content that's not very good, then the channel as a whole doesn't have a great engagement rate. And, YouTube, Google, like, that is a signal to Google. So I really focused on making the most engaging, high quality content that I could with no time wasting. And I never opened a video with an introduction or oh, like, comment, and subscribe at the beginning. I never did that because that's not what you're here for. And you don't know me often if you're coming and seeing my content. And so really prioritizing the viewer and respecting the viewer's time was my main goal and strategy in creating this content, because the more you can get traction on engagement, the more likely you are to have the algorithm recommend your content, which is ultimately what happened. So I developed a track record with YouTube first through search because the content performed very well in search, and then it had very good engagement metrics. So pretty soon, Google, YouTube is now promoting my content around the web, suggesting it as, a next step clip and that sort of thing. And so that's how a lot of people discovered it, actually, is because the algorithm recommended it.
Wow. And that's one of the things I think that brands and marketers are keen to try to do, and sometimes on very challenged budgets, is to create content that's authentic and that will kind of kick the algorithm. But it doesn't always happen first time. I remember you giving me an example when we talked previously about the Justin Bieber burrito. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
What was that? It was a Reddit example, wasn't it?
It was. So what they were doing, it was kind of a social experiment. They got a Justin Bieber lookalike, and then they had this lookalike do kind of funny things. And their goal was to go viral. And one of the pictures that they had was Justin Bieber basically attacking a burrito. So just, if you can imagine, like just face planting into the middle of the burrito. And they thought, this picture is hilarious. This is definitely going to go viral. And they put it up on Reddit under pics, and nothing happened. And that was very disappointing to them. And then they sent it off to a bunch of, media outlets, TMZ, that sort of thing, and nothing happened. And the problem is that the content just got lost. There's just too much clutter. So what they did next is they decided to pick a smaller subreddit. So they picked one called, I think it's mildly infuriating or moderately infuriating, something along those lines, and they posted it there. And actually that video or that picture was quite a good fit for mildly infuriating, because there's no reason why someone eating a burrito that way should bother you, but like it also feels wrong. And that got a lot of traction because it had less competition. So it floated all the way to the top of that subreddit. And then it started getting popular and it started floating to the top of other places. It made it to the front page of Reddit. And then when it did that, other media outlets found it and started covering it. And then it went viral.
What was the benefit to those posters? Was it would you call it a social experiment? Was it an attempt on their part to gain traction for their digital agency, or?
As far as I know, no. I think that they were just doing it as a challenge for themselves. Yeah.
Cool. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of I suppose, since it's 8 years that you've been in the role and in the country. There's been lots of changes,
Yeah.
I'm sure, in terms of the participants that you've got on the MSc. There's lots of changes in terms of digital marketing
Yeah.
generally. What are the trends and what are the changes that you've noticed over the years?
Well, obviously now AI is playing such a big role. And AI isn't new per se, but the application in everyday life has become so much more salient and also available. And one thing that I talk to our students about, though, is that AI, it's great. There's so many things we can do with it, but a lot of companies aren't seeing the returns that they're hoping for because they're not using it in the right way. So there's a lot of strategy that still goes behind using these powerful tools. And I'll give you an example. So if you imagine that a company is looking to reduce churn, they might use an AI algorithm, machine learning algorithm, to predict who is likely to churn, and then target that group with lots of promotions and lots of advertising. The problem is, in this case, it's still not very optimal because there's a number of people that are going to churn no matter what. So I give the example of, after the Queen's Gambit, I was really into chess and I was playing on the chess app, and then I kind of lost interest, and that was fine. And then I just moved on, and there was really nothing that you could say to me to get me to re-engage. I just moved on. So what you want to make sure that you do when you're using these algorithms is to optimize on the right thing. So what they should have done is optimize on who is most likely to churn, but could have been retained, or has some kind of signal that says, they're still interested in this. They're just looking to switch to another provider. Those are the people that we really want to try hard to keep. And the people that are just moving on, we don't want to spend money on them because there's no way that we can win with them. So figuring out how to ask the right questions of AI, I think, is a big next area of competency that is needed in the industry. So that's one. The other one that's kind of top of mind to me right now is around attention. So when you think about channel strategy, TV, it used to be, was a great channel for having someone's kind of full attention. And it's still a great channel, but the reality is now when you're watching TV, maybe you have your laptop over here, you have your phone over here, and now your attention is divided between all these different platforms. And that means that advertising is going to have a more difficult time breaking through. And so now we have to think about what are the channels where we have access to people's attention. And I actually think, we're sitting in a podcast, so of course it's convenient for me to say this, but I do think that audio and podcasts are one area that is really up and coming for advertising because, when I'm listening to a podcast, my attention is a lot more concentrated than it is anywhere else. When I'm online, I'm looking at lots of different things. I have my phone. When I'm watching TV, I have my phone, my laptop. But with audio, I'm actually paying a lot closer attention. So I think that you're going to see an increase in kind of advertising effectiveness and advertising interest in that space.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting one because that whole kind of idea of content being consumed the way it's consumed now removes advertisers, whether it's recorded content or whether it's streamed content on Netflix. So I think it's a really interesting challenge for marketers. And what are you seeing in terms of the students and the participants? Are they coming better equipped? Are they coming with different skills in more recent years?
Yeah, they are. I'm really especially impressed with this cohort. A lot of them have pretty extensive experience in the digital space, which is really exciting to see. This is an area that changes so fast. And so it's really exciting to have kind of all the experience that they bring. It's a very international group. And it's also, it's exciting for us because we're always innovating the curriculum. Like I never teach the same class twice, ever.
That's incredible. And what kind of roles have people gone on to after the MSc?
Well, I think they go on to all different things. I'm a big fan of seeing them go into agencies because I think that gives so much experience with so many different brands and so many different business problems, but they go kind of all over. Dublin is such a digital hub that they have tons of opportunities. So Google and Meta and, Salesforce and HubSpot and Adobe, they really go all over.
Super. And when you think about what's next for you or what's interesting for you, you've got obviously your research area, you've got your work. There's always the possibility of coming back to content creation again. Yeah. What else are you looking forward to?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to learn machine learning, and ChatGPT is helping me to learn. It's really good at producing code. There's still a long way to go, but I really think that having these skills and having a deep understanding of how these algorithms work is a critical skill going forward for anyone in business and otherwise, actually. It's also very interesting. So, that's one kind of professional skill that I'm working on. In terms of fun things to do, I am having a lot of fun with photography. I kind of go back and forth between doing things with video and doing things with photography. And so I'm kind of going back into the videography space now. So maybe I'll make some more content. We'll see. Those are kind of the big areas, I guess.
Very good. What would you say are the mistakes that businesses or brands make when it comes to creating content?
Well, I'll take YouTube for an example, because that's an area where I see a lot of, I would say, underwhelming performance in terms of the view count. And I know that content took a lot of money and resources to create. And the main problem that I see is that the content isn't optimized for how people actually search. So if you go to Google Trends and you search very broad words like how to or why or how, what you'll see is that how to content is one of the biggest keywords that people use when they search. And so when I go to brand pages, I look at the titles and they are not optimized in that way at all. It'll say something like writing a cover letter that'll knock people's socks off. And that's not how people search. And if you go and search how to write a great cover, how to write cover letter, if you go and you search how to write the best cover letter, what you get is a ton of content that's perfectly optimized for that has a lot of views already. So actually, a lot of the work in content creation has to happen before you produce the content, because otherwise you can dedicate a lot of time and resources to going after a topic that you're never going to rank for very well because there's already really great content on that. And then if you don't optimize it for how people are actually searching, now you have kind of two strikes against you. And it's very common.
So where do they go to do that research?
Well, where do the brands go?
Yeah, where does the brand go? So say, for example,
go?
if I'm a recruitment company and I want to create that piece of content on how to write the best cover letter, where do I do the research to see how people are searching?
So there's a couple places. The first place that I go is Google Trends, which is free. And I'll search for a number of different topics. If I'm thinking about writing something or doing a video on green screens or microphones or lighting or cameras, I might search all of those and see what has the most search volume, what are people most interested in terms of popularity. And then I'll go to YouTube, and there's an application I like called TubeBuddy, and I believe they have a free version. And that will help you dive a little bit deeper in terms of looking at specific keywords. So if I type in, for example, best green screens of 2024 versus best green screens for working from home, I actually find that latter one is getting a bit more traction, even though it's a bit more detailed. But in terms of like the exact thing that people are searching for, that had a bit more potential. So I'm looking at volume, but I'm also looking at competition. So something like TubeBuddy will give you a competition score, but I think the best way to evaluate that is to look at what else is out there. So I would look at how fresh is the content, how recently was it produced, and if someone watches this content, is it going to answer every single question that someone has, such that they don't even have to watch another video, like you're done? And if the answer is no, if I watch a video and I just see a bunch of stock footage and, talking about specs, but not actually showing the product, not actually testing the product, now I say, well, if this is the best content, this is what YouTube thinks should be in the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 space. Now that's a piece of content that I want to pursue because I have a chance to rank for it. And I do all of that work before I ever pick up the camera.
Cool. Tell me one more thing that you're going to focus some of your interest in outside of your work over the next while.
So my newest hobby, I would say, is jewelry making, so goldsmithing, and it's completely different than anything that I've done before. But I think I really have to thank my parents for kind of instilling this attitude that there's really nothing that you can't try. Like learning new skills is worth investing in. And so I think at this point, if I told my family, oh, I'm going to be a carpenter now, they'd be like, yeah, okay. Like they would just say, yeah, that sounds kind of normal for kind of what you like to do. So I'm always trying to learn something new. And I think it kind of comes full circle in terms of why I went into academia in the first place. I always wanted to be a student. I think of this as being a permanent, perpetual student, being in academia. So that's really what I love. And that's what I'm kind of exploring now.
Very good. And it really balances the creative with the practical. And is it more for recreation, for your own use? Is it potentially a business in the future?
It is not a business. I don't think it's a business. I'm definitely not there at all. But it's certainly something that I've enjoyed doing because I can really hone in on a single skill. Like the one that I'm really interested in is stone setting. And that's a skill that you supposedly learn that after you've learned all the metal smithing. And I wanted to go straight to stone setting. So my tutor kept telling me no. And he said, why don't you finish this semester? It's a 9-week semester. I go once a week in the evening. And he said, if you come back next semester, I will teach you stone setting. So first day of class, second semester, I have my little bag of cubic zirconia and my brass, and I'm like, I am ready. And I think his worry was that I wasn't going to really stick with it, because it is very frustrating. Like, you spend all this time trying to get a stone in there and then it just pops out. It's really annoying. But like I was really obsessed with getting it right. And so I think I spent 3 months just setting CZs into brass before I ever tried to make anything. And I still can't set the stones in a straight line, but it's all part of the fun anyway.
Brilliant. One thing we should say for anybody that wants to look and find any of your content on YouTube, on the channel, they can find it by searching YouTube for Julie Schiro. That's Schiro.
Yes, that's right.
Super.
You can enjoy one of my 5 videos.
I think when we talked about the time capsule of, and I shouldn't say time capsule, but that period of time, when the world went online, the office that I spent that 2-year period in, where we were creating content about the recruitment sector and different trends, is like a time capsule. It's covered in dust, and there's studio lighting, and there's a camera, and there's a mic that actually needs to come out of there and come back into the real world again. But it's been an interesting time. It's been fantastic catching up with you and hearing about your work. Thank you so much for coming in and doing this. Thanks
so much for having me.
If you enjoyed the podcast, please follow us on Instagram and subscribe to our YouTube channel at talentmatters_podcast, or you can find us on TikTok at talentmatters_pod. And once again, the podcast is with thanks to Sanderson, leaders in global talent solutions, and to Finero, the multi-award-winning tax experts supporting success for contractors, freelancers, and solopreneurs.